All right, welcome everybody to a very special bonus session with my good friend Cal Ewing. And for those of you who were here last week, uh, he gave us amazing information on how to participate in notes. And that was just week one of three. So today is week two. Super excited to have you back, Cal. How's everything going?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Going good. Excited
Good.
to be back to get more into the numbers, which is kind of, I think, what most people like is to be able to crunch numbers and see actual deals and all that fun stuff. So that's what we're going to do today.
We all just want to know how much we're going to make. So we'll let you take it
Yeah,
away.
exactly. All right. Well, good to see so many familiar faces back again. Glad to have you guys on. So I'm going to just share my screen. And basically, I don't have a PowerPoint for this week, but I do have a Google folder that I'm just going to share with you guys. Does that work, Mike, if I do that?
That works perfectly. Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just going to share. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. So I created a note analysis spreadsheet for you guys that you can use. Just got to get back on Zoom here. And the chat, you're right, everything seems switched around.
I know. I think they changed something on there. So,
I'm trying to, oh, there's the chat. Okay, here we go. So I'll post the link here. And I've got last week's PowerPoint on there. And then I've got a couple of resources. So I'll share my screen just so everyone can see here. Okay, so yeah, so I call it Wolfpack Note Training. And so I got my PowerPoint from last week for any of you guys that wanted to look at it. And then I've also shared this resource. It's a state foreclosure info. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this probably in session 3, but it's there. So if you want any information about foreclosure timelines for any state, there's a PDF that kind of explains like how long it takes and what the steps are. So I use that like almost every day just to refer to. So. And is my internet better, Mike, or is it still choppy?
it's not bad right now. So I'll
Okay,
let you know
that's
though,
good.
because before
Yeah.
we went live, you were kind of freezing every now and then.
Okay. All right. And then the other thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you this spreadsheet here. And what I'd ask is if you are going to use it, if you wouldn't mind just downloading it from the drive onto your computer. That way, no one starts, we don't want people entering in info and then other people are trying to use it and then it gets all, corrupted and stuff. So if you want to use it, just download it and save it. But that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to just focus on how I analyze mortgage notes. We're going to talk about performing notes and non-performing notes and kind of how we crunch the numbers to see, if there's a deal there or what your bid would have to be if you're looking at bidding on notes in order to make money. Okay, so it's a little bit different the way we run numbers compared to like buying a house. So that's what we're going to focus on. But before we get going, I did get an email from Frank Wolf. It's Frank, right? Frank Wolf?
Mark Wolf.
Or Mark Wolf, sorry. I knew it wasn't Mike Wolf. But yeah, so Mark asked if we were to foreclose on a note. He emailed me because he couldn't be here. If we're going to foreclose on a note, what's the kind of the next step or the action to take after that? And it kind of depends on if the property sells at the auction when you go into foreclosure. If someone bids on it and it sells, then that's it. Like you basically get the full balance back to you as the note owner. So whatever that borrower owed on that note, plus late fees and missed payments and all of that, you sell off that note or that property gets sold off and you get all that money back. Okay, so that's like the easiest path forward. But sometimes if maybe the borrower, maybe the property value versus the note amount, the balance there's not a lot of equity. The loan to value is very high. Well, investors may not bid on that property. And I'm sure you guys see all the time, like REO properties that banks, it's like bank owned, right? You got realtors listing bank owned properties. So those are situations where no one bid on the property. And so in that case, you as the lender or note holder would now basically you bid on it for the amount that's owing and it goes to you. So at that point, then you're the new owner of the property. And then the path is more just what makes sense for you, what you want to do. So I would probably prefer like to just sell it as is, but maybe it makes more sense to keep it as a rental. Maybe depending on the market, you might need to hold on to it for a while to get your, most bang for your buck. So rent it out. Or maybe you want to rehab it. Maybe it's in a place where you have a team and rehab it and sell it. So there's tons of exit strategies once you own that property. So I hope that helped, Mark. If not, email me again. Before we get going though, did anyone else have any questions about anything we covered? I guess I can turn that off. Last week, any questions that came up?
Nope, they're
all right.
quiet. That
Cool.
means you did a really good job last week.
Great. All right. Well, if anything comes up, definitely let me know. Okay. So yeah, this week we're going to talk about analyzing a note deal. And so the best place I think everyone should start is go to paperstack.com, and it's STAC. And this is a platform that some guys in Florida developed. I don't actually know when they started, but they've got a really, really great product that makes note buying really easy. So their whole goal was to streamline the process, make it easy for buyers and sellers to connect, to buy and sell notes. And then they've really perfected the whole purchase, the whole process of buying a note from start to finish. It's all done through their platform. So especially if you're brand new to note investing, it's a great way to get started, as I mentioned last week, because their system kind of guides you through from start to finish, which is really nice. So we're going to log in, and it's free. Like, you don't have to pay to have any kind of membership. You can just create an account. And what we're going to do first, so I'm just going to show you, if you go to for sale, and you can see you can also sell your notes here. You can become a seller if you have a note to sell. But basically, like right now, there's 205 listings on PaperStack. And so you could go through and just look at them all this way. But what we're going to do right now is actually just download CSV. And then that way we can import all that information into this note analysis template that I've made. And then I'll show you how it all pieces together. So what I'm going to do is just show you kind of how I would approach this for my own business. Okay, so first of all, we want to only look at available notes. I don't want to look at something that's pending sale. And then the cool thing is you can either look at buying a whole pool of notes, which is multiple notes being sold together, or a single asset, which I think most of us would probably be looking for single assets right now. But if you've got a lot of money to invest, maybe you're also interested in pools. So we'll go single assets. And then I personally am only interested in first lien mortgages. There is money to be made in seconds, but I like to have the security of being in first position. So there's a little bit more risk. There could be more return and reward in some cases from a second, but you're also kind of at the whim of the first mortgage if you buy a second. And so let's just focus for this on firsts. And then I like to look at performing and non-performing, but if you have a preference, you could choose it there. And then here, these are the various types of basically mortgages. So a deed of trust and a mortgage are, for our intents and purposes, the same thing. An attorney might tell you different. There might be some slight differences, but for us, it's basically the same. And then a contract for deed. I think, Mike, you had someone talk about contract for deeds at one point. But it's very similar to a mortgage. The only difference is if I sell a property to, say, Jonathan under a contract for deed, he's going to be making the payments to me, but he doesn't actually get title ownership of the property until he's paid me in full. So there's still principal and interest payment. He still owes me monthly payments, and it's set up very similar. It's just he doesn't actually get the deed until it's all fully paid off. Okay, but for our intents and purposes, you can treat these almost the same as a note, a mortgage note. Okay, So we're going to check all of these. Or I guess, there we go. And then states. So some of you guys might have preferences. I'm going to download all the states and then I'll filter the ones I don't like after. And we're going to keep everything else, I think, pretty much. We're just going to download it all. So then I'm going to export to CSV. And then hopefully it downloaded.
Well, I think you have to click it one more time.
Oh, okay.
I think it said it was building the CSV. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so I'm actually going to move this right onto the Google Drive. I'll even create this in the shared file. So we'll create a new sheet. And we'll just go paper stack demo. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll actually just keep this original list on here in case you guys want to play around and look at it. But I'm going to make a copy and move this out of the way. I'll make a copy of this and then we'll break that one down. So okay. Okay, so this is how I usually start, and I usually do this once a week. I get my VA to just pull this list, and anything new that comes in that week, I'll take a look at it. But you can see, so they have the URL here, which is nice. So we can actually look at the paper stack listings and some photos and things like that. And then these are all, like I said, they're not pools. They got the date that they were listed on paper stack, which is not working. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Why did that not paste? I may have to upload it first. Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Oh, I uploaded another sheet as well. Okay. All right, I'll convert it to a Google Sheet, and maybe that'll work. Okay. There, that seemed to fix it. All right, so okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do first is sort out the states that I don't like, and I can explain why a little bit. So I'm going to just go to filter, and then we are going to sort by state, which is over here. And so I filter out the judicial states that have the longest foreclosures. So typically over a year. And that is primarily New York and New Jersey. Seems like not very many people want to be buying notes in New York, but if you're willing to, I guess, be in foreclosure for a year and a half to 2 years, there might be some deals because no one's really buying there. But I'm not really interested in that. So I get rid of those. And then the other one that's really tricky is Cook County, Illinois. Unless you actually live in Chicago, they make it really hard for note buyers or note owners to foreclose. And I don't know the details on that. That's just more what I was told. So I skip for now, we'll just skip Illinois altogether, but some of those may not be in Cook County. And then we're going to go, and I don't like West Virginia only because it's basically rural, and Wisconsin has high taxes. And so I skip Wisconsin as well. All right. And then the only other two is Washington and Oregon. And again, make it tough to foreclose. Values are really high. So I usually get rid of, I don't think there is an Oregon on here. Lots of Texas. Yeah, so there we go. Okay. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sort it by whether it's a performing note or a non-performing note. And that's where they have performance here. So we'll just sort that. So now we got it adjusted there. And I think what I'll do is I'll just go through kind of what all these are. So these sellers here, some of them are brokers. Okay, so they're charging a broker fee. Some of them are funds that own notes that are selling off notes. Some are individual investors. Some of them might even be banks. Okay. But some of them have their actual names, and then some of them just make up a name on here. But one way to find notes is to actually see if you can figure out who owns these companies or who these sellers are, just through LinkedIn or Googling. And then reaching out to them and seeing if they have other notes that they're maybe selling off. And that actually happened to me. I was able to find some notes just by connecting with these people outside of PaperStack. And then you're saving some fees as well, because PaperStack does charge a fee for their service. So you can sometimes get notes that other people aren't seeing by searching these sellers. Okay. So those are the sellers. And then this is just the date it was listed on PaperStack. These are all available. And so this is their list price. And so this is what they're hoping to sell the note for. And what I also do is I remove any that say firm. I'm looking for flexible sellers. Okay. And then make an offer is kind of the same. So they don't have an offer price, but they just say make your best offer. All right. Oh, and I'll reformat this. Okay. Then note type, again, doesn't really matter to me. Contract for deed or mortgages or deed of trust. Then we've got the unpaid principal balance. So this is, like it says, this is how much the borrower owes in principal on this mortgage. Okay. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean this is the total amount owing, though. And that's especially for non-performing loans, right? Because if they're behind and missing payments, well, there might be late fees that are piling up. Sometimes lenders, they'll have to pay the property taxes if the borrower doesn't pay them. So they'll have to pay the taxes, which gets added on. Missed payments, all these kinds of things get added on. And so sometimes the unpaid principal balance isn't the total amount that the borrower actually owes if you were to buy that note. And there's another column I'll show you in a sec. This is the interest rate on that note. The yield, we're going to calculate our own yield, and so we'll worry about that later. But this is kind of your return based on the asking price and the interest rate and payment. This would be like your annual yield if you were to pay what they're asking. Okay. So we're going to calculate our own yields based on the types of returns that we want. Okay. Interest only. So there are a couple interest only loans, and these are probably going to be rehab loans, because that's usually what hard money or rehab loans are. So we're going to ignore those. They're a little bit different as far as how to analyze them. We're going to look for more like long-term 15, 20, or 30-year amortized loans. So I could filter them out, but we're just going to ignore them right now. Property value. Again, we got to do our own due diligence. A lot of times this is pulled off of Zillow, like this one was. Okay. You guys have probably learned by now, if you're in the wolf pack, don't really want to trust Zillow all the time. So we'll take that with a grain of salt, but we will use it for our analysis right now. And then you can see sometimes they make it hard on us. They don't even give us a value. So they want us to just do the work. So we'll use that as much as we can. And then they also have the date that they pulled the property value. So you can see if it's an old valuation date. What the heck is ITD? Investment to value. Oh, to balance. I think that's the, yeah. So this is the asking price versus the balance owing. So like this one, 100%. I'm thinking that's going to be because they want. So list price is 54,444. Yeah. So the unpaid balance here. Sorry, it might be. Got to minimize these guys. Okay. Unpaid balance is the same. So that's what that is. They want 100%. So they basically want you to buy it at par.
Oh,
Michael,
Cal,
you had a question,
Michael,
I see.
sorry, Michael Matthew has a question for you.
Yeah.
You said those estimates are not something that you can really bank on, but are they relatively accurate in the sense that if, one is, where is the column? I can't see them right now, but let's say one is, yeah, so 82.3 and one is 131.9.
Mm-hmm.
Is that difference a good indication of the relative value of one to the other? So maybe you evaluate it as at 70,000 and 119,000, that sort of thing.
I'm going to answer that if you don't mind, and just say,
Yeah, go for it.
not necessarily. To me, it's pretty much a random number generator in a lot of ways. Like if you were to look at Trulio, there's all those different sites that we evaluate a property. If you look at them, they all have different numbers, obviously, and sometimes they're considerably off. And so obviously they can't all be right. And one of the problems we have with technology compared to a person going and evaluating a property is that you could have two properties that are identical in square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, side by side. One could be totally trashed and one could be in pristine condition, and Zillow can't differentiate between the two. And so I would never rely on, like for something like this, where you're just looking at a spreadsheet and you're not actually buying the property, you're buying the note. I would use it as kind of a beginning frame of reference. But before I were to go purchase a note, or definitely before I were to go purchase a property, I would get a CMA from a realtor. And if it was really important to me, I might even get an appraiser to go look at it. So I would never rely on that, but you can use it just as kind of, I guess, a really rough ballpark estimate.
Yeah. So the one thing though, a lot of times when you're looking at a tape, which is the lingo in the note world for a list of notes for sale, if you get a tape, sometimes you're going to get like 1,000 notes on it. So you really, at this point in the game, you don't have time to go, get a CMA or go into PropStream and pull your own comps. Like you're just going to waste all your time. And so, and the note sellers know this. So really, you can base it off the Zestimate when you make your initial bid. And that's the great thing about notes, is when you make a bid, you don't have to put earnest money down like you do with houses. So we can bid on these notes based on 82.3, and then we have a due diligence period where then we can get a realtor CMA or a broker price opinion to verify the value. So, and then if it comes in, let's just say this one came in at 72, well, we could actually, we call it fading our bid, but we could actually go back to that note seller and say, look, here's my BPO. It says that this value is actually 72,000. I used 82 that you provided on the sheet, and that's wrong. So I'm going to lower my bid now to whatever you lower it to, and that's totally acceptable. So for the sake of time, when you're dealing with tons of notes, I would just use the value that's provided for now. And then once you get serious, then you start cracking down on the actual value. Okay.
I think also, specifically if you're looking at performing notes, it's not as relevant to even know what the property's worth. It's more.
Good point.
So if you're buying the property, it makes a really big difference to know what the property is worth. Or if you have a non-performing note, you want to know how much the loan to value is, because obviously if you have to foreclose and the mortgage is worth more than the property, then you're going to be not getting all your money back. And so, but if you're doing performing notes, it's not going to be as relevant.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So yeah, and then they do the loan to value. So this is using that property value. And when I buy, like Mike said, like even if it's performing, I want to make sure there's equity there. Like I work for a hard money lender essentially here in Calgary, and we always want to make sure our loan to value is in check, like 70%, 60% of value. And so the same thing, like in my opinion, when you're buying a note, even if it's performing, you want to make sure there's equity protecting yourself. Because what happens if something happens to that borrower, even though they've been making perfect payments? What if they get sick and their medical bills, and then they get behind or whatever, right? So even though everything looks good, I usually like to typically buy at 70% loan to value. I may go up to 75 depending on the borrower and the property, but you do want to have some equity to protect your investment. And so that's why this is important there. You have a few more questions here. Hey, Ginny. Regarding the unpaid principal balance, the note holder would most likely know that amount. Yes, good question. So you want to typically buy notes that are serviced by a third-party servicing company. And what that is, these are companies that are dedicated to basically doing the bookkeeping for any mortgage, okay? So they're going to be keeping track exactly the principal and interest that's been paid, any late fees, they'll apply them, the escrow balance. So if they're taking money for taxes and insurance, they'll be keeping track. So that'll all be provided to you. And if you're buying a self-service note, which sometimes happens, especially if people do like an owner finance deal, and then they want to sell that later. If they're just doing it on their own, you don't know what their background is or their training. Like they might be missing payments on there, or like who knows what their record keeping's like. So there's a lot more value to only buying service notes. And that's another thing you guys should do if you are owner financing a property and creating a note. Make sure you do have it professionally serviced, because you may want to sell that note and you can get a much better price if it's serviced by a professional company than you keep in a spreadsheet somewhere. So, all right. I don't know what this King Charles Ozzy Osbourne thing is, Michael, but I'm sure it's funny. Oh, okay. Sorry. All right. Okay, then more about the note. So when was this originated? Okay, so this is the starting of the note, the first payment. I'm typically looking for, well, it depends on the amortization, right? So like if the newer the notes, like 2022 or 2023, that means you're going to have the whole life of that loan to collect the interest on, right? And as many of you guys probably know, when you have an amortized loan, most of the interest is paid in the first payments. And then as you get down to the end of the age of the loan, it's mostly principal that's getting paid. So when you're buying it early, you're going to be able to capture more of that. But I like to make sure that I have a borrower track record first. So I'm not really interested in buying brand new notes where they've just been originated. Maybe the borrower hasn't even made their first payment yet, or maybe they've only made one. Because you don't know what that borrower's history is. Like, are they going to continue to make payments or not? Like, we really don't know. So I like to see at least 6 to 12 months of payment history in order to consider that note, just so I can see the borrower's the pattern and paying habits and that kind of thing. So that's why this is important. Then we've got the original balance of the loan. The total payoff. So this is what I was meaning about how sometimes there's additional fees and stuff charged. And unfortunately, with paper stack, the sellers sometimes fill out one, but they don't fill out the other. So in this case, the original total payoff, they have 0. All that means is that whatever the unpaid balance is here, that's the number we're going to go by. Okay. But let's see if we can find one. This one says 41. And okay, that's the same. But sometimes it's going to be a lot higher. 202 versus 62. So here we go. So this one, they only owe 62,000 on the balance, the principal, but it's probably been non-performing long enough that all of those extra fees that are added up have now gone up to 202,000. Okay. Payments remaining, and then the status. Okay, so this is very important for non-performing notes. Okay, so in this case, this one's actually in foreclosure. These ones looks like the foreclosure has not started yet. It says no legal status. Okay, sometimes it might say in bankruptcy, something like that. Oh, there's one right there. So this one, it went into bankruptcy, but they have it as the borrower's been performing. Okay, so that's good, but they did have a bankruptcy in their history. All right, and then occupancy. This is pretty important, especially if it's a non-performing note, because if a house has been sitting there vacant, let's say that they're 2 years behind and they haven't made a payment in 2 years, maybe they decide to just walk away from the mortgage, or maybe they died. If that house is sitting for 2 years in Minnesota, you don't know if have the pipes burst, has someone broken in and vandalized it. So sometimes this is very important, especially with non-performing, like this vacant one. It's up to you, but it's more of a flag that you got to be careful. You don't want to get yourself into something that's completely destroyed on the inside. Whereas if it's occupied, at least people are able to live in it. So, you're assuming that the condition is going to be at least livable. All right. Then we got the street address of the property, the property type. Oh, I forgot to get rid of land. Some people like to buy land notes. I'm not a big fan of land myself. So I'm just going to go in and I'm actually going to get rid of multifamily and other. Other could be like a commercial property or something.
Why don't you like the land, Cal?
I've had bad luck with land. One for one, I find that using comps, comparable sales don't even necessarily help you figure out the value. Like I bought a lot in Houston at the tax sale, and the comps suggested it was going to go for a pretty good price, and we didn't even come close to getting that price. So the other thing is you got to worry about it being landlocked. Can you access that lot? Does it have utilities? Does it have electrical and water and everything on it? So it's just not my cup of tea. Some people love land. I actually talked to a guy last week he buys only land notes and sells them. So okay, so it's I think we're getting close here. So the address, property type. Okay, here's our principal and interest payment. We'll come back to that. So this is if they are collecting money for taxes and insurance from the borrower. If it says 0, it doesn't mean that they're not paying their taxes per se. They just might be paying, the borrower might just be paying that separately. It's not being collected by the lender. So then there's their total monthly payment. So that would be principal and interest plus the escrow for taxes and insurance. And then this is a very important column, these next few here. So the last payment made, this is just the last time that they made any kind of a payment. So in this one, it was October 2023. This one was February 2024. Okay, so this one, they actually just made a payment. But the tricky one is next payment due. So even though these guys made a payment in February, just recently, that applied to their December 2023 payment. So whenever you make a payment, it doesn't count for the current month. If you're behind, it goes to wherever you were last paid, right? So these people, if they paid in February, they just paid for it looks like they would be their November payment. So they still owe for December, January, and February. Okay, so this is really important with the non-performing notes, is like you can see how far behind they are based on the next payment. Okay, and then the last payment kind of gives you an idea of what they're trying to do. So maybe these guys here, if they just made a payment, maybe they're trying to get caught up. Maybe they got some money and they're trying to get back on track, right? Whereas this one here, the next payment they owe is February of 2010. Okay. And the last payment they made was January of 2010. So they basically just gave up a very long time ago. Okay. So you can even tell that they have not made any attempts since then to try and get caught up. Okay. And this is the one I think that was in foreclosure. We'll look at it in a second. And then they have accrued late fees. So that's part of what goes into that total payoff I was telling you about. I don't really worry too much about this hardest hit fund state. You guys can research that. I honestly am not really worried about whether it's a hardest hit fund state or not. So I just go by that one. Judicial state, I don't really worry as long as it's not the long foreclosure states like New York and New Jersey. I'm okay. I know I'm going to be taking a little bit longer time to foreclose in a judicial foreclosure state than a non-judicial state because it has to go through the courts. But me personally, I'm okay with, as long as it's within a year, I'm okay with that. You might not be. So non-judicial state. So some of these will have both. Okay. Some of them will be just one or the other. And then last updated, that's just in PaperStack. Okay. So those are all of the columns that PaperStack gives you. And this is pretty common with any note tape that you get from any kind of seller, whether it's a bank or another investor. The only other thing you may have provided to you is the actual payment history for the last 12 months. So some note sellers are really helpful because they'll give you 12 columns, one for each month, and it'll tell you how much they paid each month. So you can really see their borrowing history. You know, have they been spotty, missing payments here and there? Have they made 0 payments for the last year? Have they made all the payments? You can really get a feel for what kind of borrower you're dealing with. Okay. PaperStack doesn't do that, unfortunately, but some do. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I think just to make this easy, let's just break this down into, we're going to do one performing note because they're pretty easy. And then we'll look at that foreclosure one and we'll look at another non-performing note. So let's just go. Anyone have any states that they invest in right now that they like for houses? Just shout out.
Georgia, Florida,
Georgia,
Texas.
Texas.
Georgia and
Let's
Texas.
do Michael.
Okay,
Let's do Texas for Michael.
Yeah, we don't have any Georgia anyways. Okay. How about we do Houston? Just because
Tennessee.
lets you guys probably. What's that?
Tennessee.
Tennessee. All right, let's keep this one on here. We're gonna keep the Houston performing note, and we'll do Memphis. How about that? And then for the non-performers, we'll do this foreclosure one. We'll just look at it. And then I think it was the first 4. How about let's do Cleveland, Oklahoma. So we'll do those for today. One other thing I forgot to mention when I'm setting up a tape is I actually go through, or have my VA go through, and I'm going to look at the property real quick. And I'm mainly right at this point looking at location. So from the get-go, I don't want to be buying anything in the middle of nowhere in the boonies. And the reason for that is because I'm remote, right? And most people will be if you're buying across the country. I don't want to be buying something where if I had to foreclose and take that property back, I can't find a plumber because the nearest plumber is an hour away, or I can't find tradespeople, you know, or whatever, someone to come and look at the property, check it out for me. So I always just go in and I look at the location of the property. And my rule is if it's near a town of like 20,000, then I might consider that property. So this one, Huntsville, I think Huntsville's, let's see.
If it's Huntsville, Alabama, that is a big center.
Yeah. So 216,000. So that's perfect. Okay. If it was like I don't know, like Piedmont, I'd probably just skip that one and delete it. Okay. So I'm looking for non-rural stuff, or at least within like a half-hour drive from a pretty major center. And that's what this one looks like. So I also do that. I'll go through and have my VA just kind of remove anything that I don't like. And that's something, this probably here, I want to look at this one just because it's in foreclosure. So we'll keep that one on. But we know Houston's big. And we know Memphis is big, so we'll do those ones. Okay. Maybe we'll have time to do one more. Okay. So let's do the performing first, just because it's a lot easier. So I usually, what I'll do is I'll either put the non-performing on a completely different spreadsheet, or I'll just highlight them because you have to treat them a different way. So we were going to make these performing notes. Let's just make these all green. Okay. So performing notes, we know that it means that the borrower has been making payments consecutively. And so I usually just go through. Actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull over and go into this analysis spreadsheet. And I do this every time is I copy my template and I put it at the end of the note tape. And we have to add one more there. Okay. And then what I do is I drag all of the first row cells over so that all the formulas come down. And what I've done is I've broken it down into your various exit strategies. Okay. So the first section here is just the note details that are important to us for our calculations, and we're going to populate that. Then I've got, this is if it's a performing note, or if we get it reperforming, we work with the borrower to get them back on track again. So that's the green. Oh, sorry, reperforming is purple, green is performing. If we have to negotiate a deed in lieu of foreclosure, like a cash for keys, where the borrowers haven't been making their payments and we negotiate that they just deed it back to us, save their credit from having a major hit from a foreclosure, they walk away from the property. That's what this is. Or if we foreclose and take the property back and take ownership of it. And then the last one is if we foreclose and we sell it at the auction. Okay. So those are kind of our main exits from any note deal. So what I do to get started is I have my legal loan balance. And so what legal loan balance is the total amount owing on that mortgage. So that includes all those late fees and everything, right? So I usually first start by finding that cell in the note tape that corresponds to that legal loan balance. And in this case, PaperStack calls this number the total payoff, okay? Let me drag it down. Yep, that did not work. Okay. Then we need our fair market value. So we go to that Zillow column. If you guys see, oh, there it is right there. Okay, and one of them it didn't have, so maybe we'll go quickly and find that in a minute. So you can see now it populated a couple things. So this here just tells the lesser between these two numbers. So this is the amount owing on the mortgage, and this is the value of the property, okay? So the reason we want to know the lesser is because we want to know if we have negative equity or actual equity in this property. And if we go to foreclose, we need to know kind of what to expect as far as, are we going to be able to sell this off at the auction if we have to foreclose, because there's enough equity there that someone will actually want to buy it for the amount owing on the note, or is there just no equity, and so we're probably not going to sell it at the foreclosure auction. Okay. And that's where these two columns kind of go in hand. So there is some equity, and the total amount is only 11,000, so 5%. So this borrower does not have a lot of equity in their favor. Okay. And so what that really means is, if we ended up foreclosing on this loan, unless it's just like a super hot real estate market and someone is fine with paying, market price for a house, and sometimes that happens. But most times investors go to the auctions and want a deal, right? So in this case, if we foreclose, there's not much equity there, so we'll probably not get any bidders at the auction, and we'll end up owning this property. Okay, so that's why these equity numbers are important. And then same with this one. So there's not a lot of equity, and really in any of these. And this one we need to get a value for. This one's got okay equity. So that one we might end up being able to just foreclose and sell it if we had to. But we're going to talk about that in a sec. All right. The other thing I get my virtual assistant to do is check property taxes owing. Okay. And we're going to talk about that next week in our due diligence section. But for now, that's where I would put that, because if we buy a note and there's property taxes owing to the county, that county can foreclose for unpaid taxes and take that to the tax auction and sell it out from under us, even though we have a first lien mortgage. Okay. So we might be able to recover our investment, but there's a chance we could lose some money if that happens. So we always want to make sure we know what the taxes are owing, and we're going to assume that if we buy this note, we're going to have to pay those and get them caught up right when we buy the loan. Okay. If we do pay the taxes, we can charge that using our servicing company. We can actually charge that to the amount the borrower owes us, right? And so if they ever sell the property or refinance, they have to pay us that money back. But we have to know that we're going to have to pay property taxes out of pocket. Okay, so that's what this is. For the sake of this, let's just pretend that it's zero for all of them. Okay. Due diligence costs. So I usually leave this at about 500, and we're going to talk all about that next week, but we're going to order a broker price opinion and title search, maybe have a realtor do a drive-by. So there's a bunch of costs, and so I always like to try and recoup my money, or at least factor in what my costs are going to be. So I leave that at about $500. And then the foreclosure or cash for keys cost is the amount of money I'm going to have to pay an attorney to do the foreclosure. Okay. And I gave you guys a link to a spreadsheet, I think, last week. And if not, I can give it to you again. It's in the presentation I gave last week. There's actually a foreclosure attorney cost website where you can kind of get a gauge on how much the cost is to foreclose. Okay. So I have it at 5,000 because that's a pretty safe number to use, but you can probably look at each specific state and get that more targeted to what the actual value is going to be. And then if we do a cash for keys with the borrower and avoid a foreclosure, I usually assume I'm going to give them that much money to walk away from the house anyway. So I use this column the same. Okay, seller asking price. Okay, and then my bid. And this is the whole point of this exercise, is to figure out what are we going to bid that makes sense for us. Okay. And then monthly payment is your principal and interest payment. There it is. So you want to make sure it's the P&I payment, not the escrow and not the total. We just want only principal and interest. Okay. Okay. All right. So now let's just set this. We'll start high. We'll just put 80% bid. I don't ever want to be buying, me personally, I don't ever want to be paying 100% full price for a note. Okay. I don't want to be buying it at par. I always want to be buying it at least at some discount. And so I usually start my bidding, I just put 80%, and then we'll work down from there. Okay. So the way this spreadsheet works is it takes 80% of that unpaid balance, so that total amount owing on the loan, and that's what my bid, it calculates for me. So if I change it to 70, you can see it drops the amount. Okay. Is there a question there? Oh, if the state sold the property to recover property taxes and the property sold for enough more than the taxes to cover the note, would you as the note holder be entitled to get your money back? Yeah. So if you're in first lien position, it's all based on your position. So if you have your lien registered on title first, after the county sells off the property for taxes, if you're next in line, then if there's enough overage, then you could get the total loan amount back from that overage money. If there's only a small amount of overage, so there's not enough to pay you the whole amount back, you'd still get whatever's left over. If that makes sense. So let's say the property taxes were $1,000 and they sold it at the Harris County tax auction that Mike goes to and does his tours at. And you had a note for $50,000. Okay. So you're owed $50,000 on that note. The county just sold that property off. Let's just say they sold it for $40,000. Okay. Well, the county gets their $1,000 in taxes that was owed to them, but you as the note holder, you only get the remaining $39,000, even though your mortgage is $50,000, right? So that's why it's risky. Is if that county forecloses, there's no guarantees you're going to get that total amount back. It only just depends on how much that property sells for. So it's pretty risky. You could lose money.
In that case, if you are registered in first position, does the county have to notify you that they're auctioning the property?
They should, and if they don't, you might be able to reverse it or cause some trouble for sure.
Yeah,
you may have the right. What's that? Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I'm just going to talk about Harris County because I can't speak for the other counties, but I can say in Harris County, they have to send you notice. Everybody who shows up on title, any lien holders have to be notified by law. And if they don't, you actually could tie up the property and stop you would actually get title back. And that's actually one of the things that I teach in the tax deed training is that when you're purchasing one of these, you've got to make sure that everybody was notified, or one of the lien holders could come back and get the property out from under you.
But one thing I have noticed is like the county will send out notices and they'll try. And if they can't reach you, like say, Michael, I don't know, you're in Ontario and they're sending to a US address, say, and you haven't gotten it for whatever reason. Well, eventually they're going to say, well, we tried. Now what we're going to do is post it publicly so that we're going to post it on the courthouse steps or whatever, or in the newspaper that this is a notice to Michael Matthew. And then the court may consider that enough. So you do have to be careful. You may miss that notice.
In Harris County, by the way, they just have to show that they sent something. They just have to prove they sent it. They don't have to have any proof that you received it, opened it. So as long as they sent something, they're off the hook. And so that's why you have to be really careful when you're either purchasing the note or if you're somebody going to the tax deed auction, you have to make sure, and there's ways to get proof that something was actually sent, but you have to make sure of that, because if you, once again, purchase a property, and even if the mortgage holder says, well, I never knew, well, if they can prove that they sent the mail, doesn't matter if it made it to you or not, then you would actually lose a property potentially to that lender.
Yeah.
But
so it's better to just not let it go to tax sale.
That's the bottom line. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So now we got all of these cells populated. And so we're going to deal first with the performing notes. So I'm going to just recolor these green. And let's deal with this first one. So we're going to go paper stack. and see what they got here. Okay. So this is a performing first lien mortgage. The unpaid balance, UPB, is $280,200. The interest rate is 8%, and they value it at $330,000. Okay. So it's fully renovated, so that's good. We're buying a brand new property or a newly renovated property. Some of this doesn't necessarily matter. Looks like they just pulled this off like a realtor listing or something. Yeah, so they're just talking about the renos here. Okay, so that's good news. The better condition of the property, that's good for a note holder. So it's performing, so the borrowers have been making their payments. Okay, it's not in foreclosure. There's no legal action taken. They owe $280,000, and the loan to value is 85% of the property value. So to me, as a note investor, I don't want to be investing at 85% of value. I just don't. So I would never offer par. Okay, because I want some equity protecting me. Okay. So the origination of this note was December 1st, 2022. So that's good because I like to see at least 6 months, if not a year, of payment history. So they've been paying on this for a little bit over a year, which is great. They started at 283, and they owe 288.40. So it looks, you can see there's a little difference there. That's probably, maybe they missed a payment at some point, or maybe there was some tax escrow money or something involved, but it's pretty much the same. So there's no big deal there. You would use this number though. This is the amount that would be owing to you if you bought this note. Okay. So there's 346 payments remaining. And so that means to me that this is a 30-year loan, because 30 years is 360 payments. So this is probably a 30-year amortized loan, which makes sense. It's about a year in. Interest rate 8%, which these days is not that 8% used to be a lot, but that's pretty average now. It's not an interest only loan, which is great. And then they got their payment amounts and everything here. So the last received was January 1st. And I'm guessing this probably just hasn't been updated because it's been listed on here for 25 days. So I'd imagine if they've been performing, they probably made their February payment as well. Okay. And then this is when the payoff is. So 2052. So if you didn't know, you could do the math of 2022 minus 2052, and there's your 30-year mortgage loan. Okay. Okay. So, and then they give the Zillow values, and they even give a Zillow rent estimate as well. Okay. So that's good. Everything there looks fine. The question is, first of all, do we have the money to buy this note? Let's assume we do. Okay. But now we need to get our yield. We need to figure out, well, what price do we pay so that we get the return on investment that we actually want? Okay. So for some of you, maybe 8% is awesome. Maybe that's great, and you're totally happy with earning 8%. Okay. If that's the case, then you maybe could afford to buy this at par, because if you bought it for the amount owing, you're going to make 8% return. You're going to make exactly the same as the interest rate. Okay. But if you're like, yeah, I could probably find a better investment than 8% somewhere. So I'm either going to walk away from this right now, or maybe we could offer them a lower price to buy the note that makes better sense for us. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here and we're going to go through this and let's figure out. So what kind of return would you guys like, or do you want me to just choose? If anyone has an idea,
15.
what kind of return
50% a year would be okay.
50, okay. I have a feeling our bid's going to get rejected.
What were you going to say, Michael?
Let's go to 15. I like that.
15, that's a good one. I like 50 better. 15 will have
15, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do is this spreadsheet that we added on to it has all the numbers that we need.
Before you do that, I've just got a couple of questions in the chat box.
Oh, sure.
So Judith is asking, what's considered a good ROI for this?
Well, it depends on a couple things. So it depends on if you are using someone else's money, like if you're having like a funding partner, you need to have a big enough return on investment so that you can pay them a decent return and then still have money left over for you for profit, right? So if you're buying with your own cash, then that's kind of more up to you. Like, are you happy with 10%? Are you happy, do you have a minimum of 12% only? Like it's all really up to you. Or maybe you're happy with 7 or 8, right?
There's people with money in their savings account getting less than 1%. So if they got 2%, they'd be doing really well. So
yeah, exactly. Or if you're like super good at finding real estate deals, then maybe 10% you could find way better by wholesaling or doing a fix and flip or something, right? So it's hard to say, but me, for my business, if I'm going to be looking for a funding partner, I market to people that have self-directed IRAs, and I run all my numbers where I'm paying them 8 to 10%. And for some people that is awful for them, but a lot of people that's way more than they're making, like Mike just said. So I usually factor in paying my investor 8%, and I want to make sure that then after I pay them, there's still enough to make it worth my time and effort. Okay. So maybe for this exercise, let's assume that we have an investor that's going to fund this for us at 8%. Okay. Any other questions? I'll click on here.
yes. So Ginny was asking, not sure if you mentioned it earlier, but could the actual owner just list the house on MLS?
For sure. For the non-performing, they can. And yeah, couple reasons. Maybe they're just trying to like stretch it out and see how long they can stay in that house before they get foreclosed on. That happens sometimes. It could be maybe that there's not enough equity. So you're going to see maybe even one of these examples where the actual amount they owe to the bank is more than the value of the house. So they got maybe way behind, and now it's not worth it enough. So they can't sell the house because they'd have to come out of pocket to pay the rest of the mortgage to the bank. So they're stuck, right? So, but if they have equity, then they can definitely list the house and sell it off and pay off the bank. So, and that could happen. You might buy a note and then a month later they pay you out, right? They're allowed to do that.
And then there's a comment. I have a professional opinion, and this is from an accountant, that my suggestion of 50% is greater than 15%. So it's been shown to be correct by a professional. Thank you for the 2 thumbs
There's
up.
a tidbit. You never know where the tidbits are going to come from in these calls, but we all learned something there.
And then Judith was asking, if you don't have a funding partner and use your own cash, what would be a good minimum to go by? And I think you kind of answered that, though. It's really whatever is acceptable to you. If you're willing to do it for 5%, obviously you're going to have a lot more options than you can say, oh, I'm only going to do it for 20%. But if 5% is not acceptable to you, then it doesn't mean you have to go and try to get 5%. So I think what it always comes down to, really, what are your other options for your money? What could you potentially invest it in that might give you a better return? The great thing about notes, especially performing notes, is that it gives you passive income every single month. And so even if you were to go and, let's say, invest in the stock market, unless you're buying a stock that pays dividends, you're just kind of gambling that it goes up. With this, mortgage is registered against the properties. You have to kind of balance not just the return you're going to get, but you also have to look at, well, what's the safety of the investment? What are the chances I'm going to get my money back? And but I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. It's whatever is acceptable to you, in terms of what you're willing to make as a return on your investment. Anything you want to add to that, Cal, or?
Yeah, and your risk tolerance, right? Like you might be able to make a way better return flipping, like fix and flips, but you might be taking on way more risk if you're doing a fix and flip, right? So you have to balance your risk. Whereas if it's a performing note, it's pretty safe, like Mike was saying. So maybe you're okay with, an 8% return or even less because it's a safe, you're getting paid consistently and it's low risk, right? And the other thing is time. Like you may say, well, I'm only going to get 15% or I'm not doing it. But if you're spending a year trying to find the deal that gets you 15%, you're wasting all those months of not making anything. You might have been better off just taking the 8% note, right? So you got to really balance a lot of things.
Yeah, and if once again, if your money's sitting in a savings account earning almost nothing, if you could get 8%, that'd be amazing and have your money always in play. But once again, no right or wrong. If you have other investments that are currently making you 12%, well, then you'd be kind of, if they eat all things being equal, if they're equally safe, you'd be kind of dumb to say, oh, I'm willing to take 8% when I can make 12%. So it just really comes down to what your other options are and where your money is kind of working for you currently, and you know where is it going to serve you the best.
Yeah.
All right. You're caught up on the questions.
Questions. Okay. So we're going to start with this Houston one. So 500, I usually keep it at the same. Now I know in Texas, and this is just from my experience, but in Texas, you can foreclose for about $2,500. Okay. So I'm going to lower that right now. Seller's asking 280, doesn't really matter. So let's just start with 80%. Okay. If I were to buy this note for 80% of the total payoff, the total balance owing on that note, not the value of the property, but the note payoff, we'd be buying it at basically 225. Okay. And then I add on this sell here, factors in my $500 due diligence plus my taxes owing. So if they're behind by $2,000, it would add that on here. Okay. So that's why this is a little bit more, as it's factoring in that 500. Okay, so then what is my purchase price? So my 220, basically 225 to property value. And you can see now we're at 68% loan or purchase price. My money is 68% of the property value. And so that's a lot better, because now I've got basically like 30% equity there to protect my investment. If I ever have to foreclose or take that property back, I've got some equity protecting me now. Okay. I didn't like the idea of like the 85% loan to value. To me, that's not enough. Okay. And again, it's your own risk tolerance. Maybe to you need at least your max is like 60% loan to value. And if it's a crappy property, that might make a lot of sense, but this one's like a newly renovated, nice house. So I'm pretty good with 68% loan to value. Okay. So then there's the monthly payment that I'd be getting in if I bought this note. Okay. Now let's look at this as a performing note. Okay. So this column here basically just takes your principal and interest payment that your borrower would start paying you every month and multiplies that by 12 months. Okay. So if you bought this note at 80% of note value, you'd be making just a little bit under $25,000 a month. Or a year, sorry. Okay. Then it calculates a 1-year yield. And what that is just 1 year's worth of principal and interest payments divided by your investment. So how much cash you have in the deal. Okay. It's just like a very simple return on investment calculation. Okay. So in this case, if you could buy this at 80%, you're getting an 11% yield. Okay. That's awesome. I mean, well, I guess it depends. If you can flip houses and make 20% or 25% or something, then that's not very awesome at all. And that's really where your own personal preference would come into play. If I'm going to be paying an investor 8%, though, this may not be high enough for me, okay, if I'm not using my own funds. So again, it's all personal. It depends on your situation, okay? But that's what you'd be making. So let's now say I'm going to be paying, let's say Mike's my funding partner. So Mike's like, I'm like, hey, Mike, I'm going to pay you 8%. You're going to lend me the 225. I'm going to pay you 8% per month or annual. So let's just say Mike says, sure, that sounds awesome, because all I do is travel now. I don't actually invest in real estate anymore. And 8% would be huge to help me for my next cruise. So let's just say that's it. Then I'd be making $1,501 a month interest payment to Mike if he's earning 8%. Okay. So that would be coming out of the payment that I'm getting from the borrower. So then if you times that by 12, I'm paying Mike $18,000 a year to borrow his money at 8%. Okay. Well, what that leaves me, which is really just the 12 months of PNI minus the amount I'm paying my investor, leaves me just under $7,000 a month or a year. Okay. And that would work out to $575 a month for me after I pay Mike his interest. All right. So again, this is up to you what makes sense for you. Like if you're able to do this deal with none of your own funds because you borrowed the funds, then maybe you're totally fine making 575. Like, wow, no money down deal. I'm making 575 cash flow a month. Boom. Okay. Maybe you think, well, this is a pretty big deal. Like it's valuable property. Maybe I need to be making more than this. So then you need to adjust your bid price. Okay. Let's say that we are funding this deal with all our own money. We're not using a private investor. Then of course we'd be making the principal and interest payment. And so we'd be making the whole amount ourselves. Okay. So the numbers would be the same. Okay. And our yield would be 11% return. Okay. So let's say, well, I think we should go a little lower because that yield is just not going to cut it for me. Well, then you can just start going down until you hit your target. So maybe you want to get 15% like we said. So we're going to have to go pretty low on this note to hit our goal. Okay. And so we'd have to be offering 60 cents on the dollar on a performing note that's been just rehabbed in order to get our yield that we were hoping for. And in my experience, the performing note market, there's no chance in this case that you'd win the bid. Most people right now are paying 80 to 90 cents on the dollar for a performing note if it's a good property. And this one is. So in this case, because the interest rate is only 8% that the borrower is paying, I think it was. Well, whatever. Because of that, it's just this probably isn't going to work for you if you want 15% yield on a performing note. Okay. So any questions on that, just a performing note and how we make our bid?
Michael has a question. How many of the notes go to maturity as opposed to getting paid out along the way? And I can answer from my experience that almost none of them, like on a 30-year mortgage, nothing ever goes to maturity because people move too often. If they're paying 8% and then the rates go down to 3 and 4%, they have a chance to refinance and pay you out. They're going to. So they don't usually, from my experience, go to maturity. What's been your experience, Cal?
Yeah, like they say on average, people move like, what is it, every 7 years or something. So I agree. You might be lucky and they end up just being those people that stay their whole lives. But yeah, you really don't know. There's no way of really knowing what's going on with your borrower. You just get to see their payment history. So
some mortgages have a built-in payout penalty as well, in which case you get, when they pay out, you get a little bit extra or something extra, and then you can just go reinvest it. So,
yep, good point. And that's one of the reasons that I do like to buy at a discount. Like if I'm fine with making 8%, I could pay par, right? I could pay the balance owing, and then just start making 8% on the payments. But what happens if they do sell in 6 months? Well, my money, I get my money back, but I didn't make any profit on it really. So that's another reason maybe to buy at a discount if they do sell or refinance. Maybe they find a better loan, right? And they refinance with, Wells Fargo and pay you out, right? So
another thing, by the way, if you want to look at it from a different perspective, is you can actually flip a note. So if you have something that's yielding you 10%, and somebody who's willing to take 7%, you can actually have them give you a premium over what you paid for the note.
Yep.
So it can work the opposite as well. So sometimes you actually buy it because you're going to be able to sell that note to somebody else because they're willing to take a lower interest rate than you.
I have seen people asking over par. It's like 105% as their asking price. And usually that's because there's a lot of equity. So the house is worth $500,000 and the loan is only, 200,000, say, and the interest rate's good. So they might actually be trying to sell it above par.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's just look at this one real quick. So then once you're ready to make your bid, you may want to do a little more digging now, right? So you want to check out the house, just make sure it doesn't look like it's ready to fall down or there's major repairs or anything. If it's Houston, I'm going to check my flood zone, do the neighborhood check. This looks pretty great, but I like to do the neighborhood check, and then maybe at this point I'll go into PropStream and pull my own comps. But if I've got 100 loans to go through, I probably wouldn't at that point. But you can dig around a little bit. And then, like I said, next week, we're going to go through all the due diligence once your bid's accepted, everything you got to do. So, all right. So now, just for sake of time, like the performing ones are all kind of the same. Maybe we'll look at another one later, but let's go to a non-performing just for sake of time here. So I'm going to do this other one first, not the foreclosure one. But let's just look at this. Okay, so this looks not bad. Again, not falling down. The problem with PaperStack is they usually don't have more than, oh, sometimes they have more. That's good. Usually they just have one photo, but this one they actually provided two. Okay, so Cleveland, Oklahoma, not Cleveland, Ohio. So this borrower owes $80,000, really nice interest rate, 11.9. So this makes me think maybe it was like an owner finance deal or a hard money loan or something. And the value though is not much more than the property. So about give or take same. And that's not necessarily a problem if we're buying at a discount, okay? And we'll talk about that. So this seller says, non-performing loan, 55% of UPB. So maybe that must be what they're asking. Yeah, 44. So they're willing to sell it at a discount right off the bat. Okay. So they're willing to sell this note for $44,200. And the borrower owes $80,000. So that's cool.
Michael's got a question for you, by the way.
Sure.
What's the note manager? It says the note is managed by Thousand Keys.
Yeah, so these guys are, I Googled them a while back. They buy and service a lot of notes. They're only in a few states, can't remember which states they're in, but they're basically like a fund. And I think they also do like owner finance to help people, with home ownership and that kind of thing. But they're a fairly big organization. They do quite a bit, and they sell quite a bit here on PaperStack. And they usually have the same little spiel.
We can't hear you, Cal.
On here as well. So they service and manage, which is good. So one thing to mention.
Yes.
Hear me now?
There's a delay there for some reason.
Okay.
Oh, we see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you.
Okay. Your servicing.
Uh-oh, we're losing you again.
Hear me now?
Cal's doing his ventriloquist act. We can hear him talking, but his lips aren't moving.
I switched mics. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now you're good.
It's going through my webcam though, so it's usually not as good audio.
Yeah, sounds great. And it matches up with the movement of your mouth.
Okay.
So
Well, tell me if it starts getting bad. Okay.
right.
Yeah, I was just going to say your servicing company that you use to manage your note needs to be registered in that state. So you need to make sure that when you buy a note, you have either the servicing company you like that's registered there, or you need to find one that is. So, okay, so the note is in default. Foreclosure action has not been started. So they haven't done anything towards foreclosure. The fund that owns this asset is closing down, so the note must be sold. So these guys must just be servicing this loan for a fund. And now they want to sell it. They don't want to deal with the foreclosure because they're shutting down their fund. Okay. So one thing to note, it's been on here for 2 months with no buyers. So maybe it's not such a good deal. But non-performing mortgage, they owe 80, loan to value 93%, as we noticed. Okay, so they don't have a lot of equity, right? So one thing to think about right off the bat is if you were to foreclose and there's no equity, probably you're not going to be able to sell this off at the auction, right? Because they owe 80 and no one's going to buy, probably no one's going to pay par for it, but you never know. Okay, so they'd originated really recently, so last July, and they're already not making their payments. So it looks like they actually haven't made any payments because the balance is the same. So whatever happened here, they've never made a payment. So there's their P&I payment that they are supposed to be making, okay, on 11.9% interest. And then they are collecting taxes. And okay, so they did make one, it looks like. They made the first payment only. And it's a 30-year loan. Okay, 2053 is the payoff. Okay, how's the audio? Fine?
Yeah, your audio is good. I have a quick question for you though. Is it considered illegal or bad etiquette if you were, let's say you were considering this, would it be possible to contact the borrower and try to negotiate with them and say, hey, if I take over this loan, I would like to modify it in such and such a way? Is that possible, or is that considered really bad, circumventing the owner of the note?
Yeah, I haven't done it. I've heard it is a little bit bad to reach out. One way to do it is just to check if someone's living there, is just have a realtor knock on the door and be like, hey, we're just looking for people that might be selling. But you kind of going around the lender like that is, yeah, it is bad etiquette.
Just checking.
However,
I think that would sometimes be a deciding factor whether you want to take over a note or not. Because if I could have a conversation with them and say, hey, if I could bring your payments down, or we could stretch it out for longer or whatever, if you're able to pre-negotiate before you actually bought the note, then you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Just
yeah.
I want to get in trouble.
The other opportunity with some of these is maybe this seller is willing to do a subject to and let you buy the house and take over the payments. Or maybe they're just really motivated to sell now that that the lender might be starting foreclosure. Maybe you could buy it cash, right? So sometimes there's just opportunities to buy the house as well.
True. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go. So let's go and look at this now on the spreadsheet. All right, so they're asking for 55%. And we know that they've made basically just one payment. So let's just see, let's run our numbers now. Okay. Yeah, so the legal loan balance is 80,000. We got our property value there. And we know there's like zero equity. In this case, I would definitely check property taxes. And like I said, we'll do this next week to save time. But they probably do owe property taxes if they haven't been paying. Maybe not, because this is like a year-old loan, but a lot of times non-performers owe taxes. Now, here is where you would want to check what the cost to foreclose is. And we'll use 5,000 for now, but you can narrow it down a bit. Seller's asking for 44. So let's see if that actually makes sense. So there's no reason right now to pay more than what they're asking. So let's just figure out, let's go 55, what they were saying. So let's see if this makes any sense for us to pay what they're asking. So again, this factors in our due diligence and taxes owing. I don't add the foreclosure cost here. We add that in the foreclosure section. So that would be an extra cost, but we're going to add that in a different spot. Okay. So now we have a couple options, and we don't really know how this is going to shape out unless, like Mike mentioned, we could talk to the borrower ahead of time. But we need to consider the fact that maybe in some cases we might be able to get the borrower on track again. And that really depends on the payment history. So if you can get access, you can actually ask the seller, like right in PaperStack, you can message them and say, hey, can you send me the payment history for this borrower? And in this case, we know that they've only made one payment, but let's say, they maybe have been making, a double payment here and then a month with nothing, and then maybe another payment and then 2 months with nothing, and then another double payment. So you can see their habits. And if it looks like they're doing their best to try and make payments sporadically, that's a perfect candidate for a re-performing loan. Okay. And ultimately, as real estate investors, we do want to do good as much as we can for people and help people out, right? So I think, and some investors wouldn't think this, but I think it's probably good to try and work it out with the borrower if possible, to see if they can keep their home, especially if it's the home that they're living in, right? If it's an investment property, something, whatever. But if they have their family living there, the first action, I think, shouldn't necessarily be to just foreclose, okay, kick them out. So we want to look at, like, what would that look like if we can work with the borrower, and maybe we can get them back on track by, maybe we'll forgive, all those back payments they missed. Maybe we'll literally just say, you know what, we'll wipe those clean, they're gone. Or maybe we can say, well, we'll take, the 10 payments you're behind on, and we'll move that to the back end of the loan. So we'll increase the loan length and the total amount of money that you own or owe. So there's different ways you can modify the loan for them to help them stay in the home. But to do that, we need them to come to the table to show that they're serious. Okay. And usually what you're going to do is want to get them on what's called a trial payment plan. So you could say, okay, Mr. Borrower, like, we're going to move all those back payments to the end of the loan only if you can pay consistently for 12 months and you come to the table right now with 4 months up front. Okay. And so that's what this is like, if we're going to reinstate the loan for them, they need to come to the table and show they're serious. Okay. So you can change that number to whatever you want. Let's just say, though, we want them to come to the table up front with 4 months of payments. And then they need to show for 12 months that they can make their payments on time. And if they can do that, then we'll file a loan modification, and we'll permanently change their loan terms for them in their favor. Okay. So the good thing about this for us as note investors, because we are taking on a little bit of a riskier deal, because we may have to foreclose or who knows what, we get extra money out of this up front. Okay. So if we want 4 months up front, then he's going to have to come to the table with $3,279. Okay. Then if he does what he says and pays the 12 months in a row and starts performing again or re-performing, well, then that's going to be an extra 13,000 plus, or sorry, 12 months of interest plus the reinstatement fee would be 13,000. Okay, is what we make in the first year. And so our first year yield is a whopping 29%. Okay, so that's pretty great if we can get them performing again. All right. And so since I'm not borrowing any money, I'm funding this deal myself, I'm going to make that full amount. Okay. If we have an investor that we're going to pay 8% to, this is where you go back to here, then that's fine. We would just be making less on that deal. Okay. Now let's say after they get paying for a full year, now they're just in regular performing status. The yield on that as a performing note would be 22%. Okay, so that's pretty great. That's a nice return, no matter how you cut it. Okay, even if we don't charge the 4 months up front, that's still a 22% yield. Okay, so that's great. But maybe these guys have moved out. Maybe they've passed away. Who knows? Maybe they just cannot afford to get back on track. They lost their job. They have no income. They have no hope of possibly getting back on track. Then what we do is we say, okay, well, Mr. Borrower, Mr. Property Owner, I don't want to see you go through foreclosure. I don't want to have to deal with lawyers. Neither do you. I don't want to see you have 7 years of credit impacted because you have a foreclosure on your record, on your credit score. What if we negotiated a cash for keys? So you basically vacate the property. You leave it nice, like broom swept and clean. You don't trash it. You leave nicely and peacefully, and then we'll give you money to walk away. And in exchange, we get the deed to the property. Okay. And that's why they call a mortgage a deed of trust, because you actually have a right to basically ownership if they deed it back to you as the lender. Okay. So let's say that they say, yeah, let's do that. Okay. So in that case, let's just say that we're going to give them $5,000 up front, which is the same as the cost of foreclose. And that's what this is here. So we're going to give them $5,000 to walk away. Okay. Well, I've got this set up so that once we take ownership of the property, what we're going to do is just hire a realtor and sell it off. Okay. You may want to keep it as a rental or something, but I don't have that in this system, but you could also look at that as well. What would your cash flow be as a rental? So what do you think a property like this would sell? I mean, none of you guys are from Oklahoma, but, where'd it go? But let's just say it's in pretty good shape. So let's just say we could sell it for a quick sale at 90 cents on the dollar. Okay. So we're going to sell this. We're going to put 90. Maybe we'll put 100. We'll sell it at full price, but let's just go for a quick sale. We're going to sell it at a discount. So this is going to sell it at 90% of the market value, which is 69,000. And let's say, you know, maybe we're going to assume that it's going to be a little bit, you know, we have to clean it out, maybe put like, give it a coat of paint or put new carpets in or something. So let's put 5,000. This sale cost that it's built in here, it factors in 6% to a realtor, as well as the cost for title insurance and all your closing costs, which is about 8.25%. So my sale costs are that. So if we were to do this deal and get a deed in lieu of foreclosure, then we'd be making about 5,000 profit, which is an 11% return. Okay. And that is with the 8% owing to the investor, I think. Yeah, that includes the fact we have to pay our investor his 8%. Okay. So if we have no investor and we just put our own money in, then we'd be making about 8,600 in profit. Okay. So again, you have to decide, is that worth it to you for all of that or not, right? And you may have to actually get a realtor to go and drive by and say, you know, is this property in good shape or is it going to need, is it just awful? And you may need to figure out, you know, if it is awful, well, this number is going to have to be a lot higher than just 5,000 to sweep it and hire cleaners and that kind of thing, right? So that's one thing you need to consider, but that's how that would pan out. The other option is the final option, and then we'll probably end her up here. Is what if you take it to the auction and you go through the full foreclosure? So you hire a foreclosure attorney and you get them to handle the foreclosure for you. So in this case, the borrower owes 80,000. Okay. Now, I like to think that in people that go to foreclosure auctions, they're going to want to discount more than just your average MLS buyer. And so I factor in, typically, it depends on how hot the market is, but we'll say 80 cents on the dollar, maybe even 70. Why is that the same number? That makes 0 sense. There must be some glitch here. 69.40, what the heck? I don't know. I really don't understand. I might have to fix this. That's really weird. All right. We'll put 70 in. I'll fix that for you guys. So anyways, let's assume that an investor is going to only want to pay 60. They won't go any higher than that. Okay. So the way I have this set up is 60 it's lower than the amount owing on the note. Okay. So 80 is owing. So they can't bid 60 because you want to get the full payoff back, right? So in this case, no one's going to bid on this property at the auction, and you're going to have to take it back as an REO, which means that you now own the property as the note holder. And then you're back to this scenario here, basically, because now you own it and you can, clean it out, hire a realtor, and it's basically now you're in this scenario here. Okay. If there was a lot of equity, and let's say, you're only owed, let's just say 30,000. That's how much the borrower owes. Let's go 80. And let's say the investor is willing to pay 60,000. Okay. So now it says, because an investor is willing to pay 60 and you're only owed 30, well, now this changes to foreclosure sale, and then it'll factor in what your actual profit's going to be. And our numbers are all weird now because I just monkeyed with that, but it would tell you what your actual profit would be if it's sold at the auction. Okay. So there we go. So this only triggers if it looks like you'd be able to sell that property at the auction. Otherwise, it's going to tell you to go back to this REO section to figure out what your outcome is going to be. Okay. So what I do is I look at these three scenarios and I want to make sure that no matter what happens, I'm going to make a profit. Okay. And a profit that makes sense for me. So I may have to actually go in and offer 40 cents on the dollar, or something like that, and then see how it affects my numbers. And even though the reperforming note seems like this is going to work really well, you don't know if they can even, maybe they're not willing to get reperforming. Maybe they've passed away, like I said. So you want to make sure that each of these scenarios, you're at least going to break even, and not lose any money. So in this case, you're going to profit here. And you're going to profit with the reperforming note. So probably at that bid price of 40 cents on the dollar, if they'd accept that, then this is probably a pretty safe bet for you. Okay. So I think that's a good place to stop, just because we've gone a long time. We won't do these other ones, but you guys are welcome to play around with this spreadsheet, and I just need to tweak that one thing. But any questions?
Anyone? They're being quiet. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, great job as always, Cal. It was very thorough and informative. I learned a lot. It's been very interesting.
Well, I want you guys to be able to go on PaperStack and make bids if you want. So
yeah, very cool. Next week we're not going to be here because I'm going to be hopping on a different cruise, and it's going to be the first day there, and I don't want to bet that I won't know if the Wi-Fi is going to work or not. So we're going to stall and go literally a week later. But tomorrow we will be doing Q&A. So I'll be back here at 5 p.m. Mountain. That's right, 5 p.m. Mountain. So hope to see you all there. Cal, thanks again for everything. That was really good.
Thanks, Cal.
Any last minute questions? All right. Well, thanks again, Cal. Thanks for being here, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Have a good one.
See you later.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you, Mike.
See you
Bye.
guys.